Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are here continuing what is usually an IG Live, but today we are going to do it as a just as a recorded interview for technical difficulties. And we are getting to talk today with to hear from Dr. Valerie Williams-Sanchez. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very excited.
Sure. Hi.
Yeah. Well, why don't we jump right in? You can tell us about yourself and about the Cocoa Kids collection.
Sure. So, and I'll keep the bit about me short and sweet. So, I'm Valerie Williams-Sanchez. I am a children's picture book author and illustrator. It's something that came to me and came into my life pretty much serendipitously. My three books are centered around the children in my life. My first title, Isaiah and the Chocolate Mountain, is based on my nephew. My second book, Eddie and the Hot Cocoa Hot Rod, is based on a dear friend imagined in his youth. And the third is about my daughter, Lorena. And that title is Lorena and the Magic Mocha Mirror. I came to writing about children's books because I didn't see them out there for my multicultural children, the people in my family who are, we have a very broad kind of cross section of cultural expressions and experiences, and I didn't see them reflected in the children's books that were available to me at the time. Now, my daughter's 25, and my nephew, well, at this point, my nephew just started high school, but you can imagine back when they were, in their early years, in their growing stages, and still in grade school, it was really disappointing not to be able to pull a book up that would really reflect their experiences, or at least have images of people who look like them. So I, set about once my 25-year-old was, out of the nest, and I was an empty nester, to kind of change things. And so I wrote three books, about a year apart, and just really tackled some issues that I thought were important in the lives of the children around me. So that work led to academic study, and some of it is, I guess, as they say, the rest is history. And I'm now Dr. Valerie Williams-Sanchez with a PhD in literacy.
Oh, wonderful. And I'm sure they love seeing, the fact that you've written books based on them.
Yeah, it was really great, specifically and particularly for my nephew, because he was in school when I was writing the books, and his was the first title. It wasn't the first imagined, because I did, like I mentioned, conceive of the idea when my daughter was actually in school, like third grade, but she wanted nothing to do with it. My daughter was like, "No, I'm not doing this, Mom. That's crazy." But my nephew, he got to benefit from it because it became, I feel, and I think his mom and my brother would agree, it was a really grounding experience for him. Literacy became real. It was relevant. Books were, something that spoke to him because he saw himself in the books. And in the readings and conversations and interviews that kind of followed the books being published, it became real. People were asking him, "So, Isaiah, do you not like chocolate?" And now, for those of you who don't know, the premise of my first book is about Isaiah, the little boy who doesn't like chocolate, when everyone around him, in his family, in his world, everyone loves chocolate. So the original kind of, the immediate response is, "Wait, what's wrong? You don't like chocolate? Can it be?" But again, my nephew, he loves chocolate and is very quick to tell people, or at least back then was very quick to say, "I like chocolate."
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it went, I guess I had thought that you had done your research first and then wrote the books, but it was really the other way around. So the process of doing the books led you to have that curiosity about literacy.
That is exactly right. And interestingly, when I set out to, in my professionally, I'm a marketing communications person. I'm a marketing communications, multicultural marketing communications professional for 25 years. And so when I set out to market my books, I had to do some digging to find out who my target audience was. I mean, beyond the fun of creating the story that was an educational experience for my nephew, fueled by the conversation of a family of educators. My mom is a PhD. My brother is a in-school teacher. He is a master's of education. So we're all very education minded in our family. But when it became time to sell these books, that's where my marketer's hat came on. And I started trying to find out, how do I target? How do I reach people? How do I reach the people who need this or who have an interest in this content? And what I found out was that children of color have among the lowest literacy levels, the
Mm.
lowest in the country. And that just sparked something in me because it became real. It was too close to home. I was now in the battle, in the conversation. And so one thing led to another. And a lot of the research that I ultimately did in literacy came back to the other academic work that I've done. My master's is in journalism and my bachelor's is in English literature. So it was really a full circle experience for me, and really kind of giving me the opportunity to really kind of dig into why is that so? Why are children of color the least literate and the least served by publishing, which is the other kind of interesting detail that kind of surfaced in my research. And so one thing led to another, which led to another, and that led me to do my academic work in literacy. And ultimately, for my dissertation, I looked at how empathy is impacted by reading experiences and how children develop empathy as a result of the books that they read. And that's the big picture of my research. For my dissertation, I developed a measurement tool, a quantitative measurement tool to be able to kind of understand what that meant. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds on the academics because that's the other side of my brain. This is the fun side of my brain that I'm here with you today. So, yeah.
Well, so what, like you said, the big picture about how children develop empathy. So how does that relate to the idea of diversity, and then relate again to the idea that children of color having much lower literacy rates?
So one of the key things about literacy and one of the key things about reading is motivation, right?
Yeah.
And I'm picking some of the things that are, of course, most accessible that people are most familiar with. You want to read what you want to read. You pick up a book because it looks interesting to you. And if you're interested, you'll read it, right? You'll make the
Right.
effort, you'll take the time.
Right.
Oftentimes, kids who don't see themselves in books are not motivated to read those books,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
So it's really important to have kids be exposed to content that is of interest to them. Now, what's more interesting to anybody than themselves, or people who look
Right.
like themselves, or things
Right.
that they can relate to, right? So really, that's kind of the notion of representation and why it's so important in terms of education. Now, in terms of empathy, another dimension for reading is that when you're developing your reading skills, you're learning how to build knowledge. You're learning how to take information in and make sense of it. And if you're only exposed to a finite bit of information, your ability to like to understand broader experiences is somewhat lessened.
Yeah.
So in terms of empathy, in terms of exposures to cultures, reading books about other children's experiences is a really rich and tangible way to learn about other people, learn about people who might be outside of your experience, might be outside of the communities that you live, might have experiences that you never would have dreamt to have had. And we see this not just as children in looking at picture books, but as adults as well. Think of the books that you read as an adult that have exposed you to worlds that you never imagined, and just immersive experiences that help transform your way of seeing the world.
Mhm.
All of that starts when you're learning to read. And so those processes, when they're engaged and with the explicit purpose of developing empathy or learning to take other people's perspectives, that is a lifelong skill that everyone can benefit from.
Right. And I saw that you had, I can't remember whether it was your website or an article I found on another, that you mentioned that the United Nations has actually expanded their idea of what literacy is, that it's not just learning the words, but being able to tackle these complex concepts like empathy.
Yeah, and increasingly in our digitized and tech-driven world, literacy goes beyond just what's on the words on the page, right?
Right.
Literacy is learning how to code and decode information, understanding language, learning how to take coded information and transfer it into real experiences, having the ability to go into different situations and to be able to pull information from different sources. So that's multi-literacies and multimodal learning. You don't always have to get your information from a book. Increasingly, we're getting our information from screens.
Mhm.
Increasingly, we've gotten, our information from audio tracks, from audio information, and your ability to process that increasingly helps you learn, helps you build your knowledge base, helps you build your, we call them schema, right? These are a set of experiences and a set of kind of frameworks that you use to kind of order the world. So the more experiences you have, the easier it is for you to take information from one experience to the next and to hopefully have positive experiences, learning
Right.
experiences.
Right. And your books fit right into that because they do, help children expand their world and like you said, and to have culturally relevant. I know you mentioned about the importance of having culturally relevant materials when you're learning to read, when you're kind of advancing in literacy. Was that something?
Yeah.
Were you very conscious of that when you were creating the books, or that was kind of
Yeah, actually, fortunately, as an undergraduate, my English literature study really touched upon that. We did some critical theoretical work where we were really understanding the importance of seeing different lived experiences in our reading and really taking critical kind of approaches to understanding what we were reading. So a lot of what I've kind of imparted in my books hopefully will help repeat that same kind of experience where people are learning from the different experiences around them, and
Mhm.
that's really what my books are about. I wrote the books with the family members in mind as essential characters, but really a lot of the messaging, a lot of the content was specifically aimed at the children whom I was in class with. I was an in-class teacher for at-risk teenage boys, well, actually at-risk boys ages K through 12, and helping them really kind of learn better, right? Helping them in their educational spaces. And there were a number of things that I just noticed that I felt like these books would actually address. And that was numeracy. So some of my kids were challenged with numbers and fractions and things of that nature. So this was a way in. This was an opportunity to tell story and to engage my students in what I felt was an interesting way.
Mhm.
Um, some of my students also had behavioral issues. So you'll notice in Isaiah and the Chocolate Mountain that he has, he basically, he's very upset. He gets angry. He got a gift he didn't want and he reacted.
Mhm.
So it's all about understanding our emotions, which is another key socio-emotional learning point that
Mhm.
we deal with in schools these days. So it was really important for me to incorporate that content into the first book. My second book is about a little boy who is challenged in school because he just isn't interested in the subject matter. He loves cars, you
Mhm.
know, cars that race, cars that roar. The louder their engine, he
Right.
likes them more. So in that regard, I try to incorporate rap, a little rap line because many of my students were interested in rap, and I felt that it would resonate with them, and fortunately, it did.
Oh, that's why, and I think that's so wonderful how you've incorporated all these other issues, like you said. I mean, kind of looking at the whole child, not just learning to read, but really the larger concepts and these things that will make them successful in learning and just in life. And
Yeah.
actually leads to one question I was wondering was if you could talk more about, you always include games and activities in a lot of your books, I noticed. And one of them, and relates to when you were talking about the numeracy, that one of them was a math skills worksheet. So why did you feel like that was important to always have that aspect?
So the children I work with, and this goes beyond my most recent in-class experience, and I've taught kids of all ages, both here in in my native California and also in New York, where I currently reside. The resounding question that always came up was, why do I need to know this?
Yeah, I hear that all the time from my third grader. Yes. Why do I need to know this? Is this important?
What does this matter? So in this instance, it was a perfect opportunity to show that numeracy, that decimals, placement, number value, all of that stuff, it has relevance in our world. And specifically for the book Eddie and the Hot Cocoa Hot Rod, the worksheets they look at number placement. So you're looking at different scores, race scores. So all of a sudden, this kid who's so interested in car racing, all of a sudden he knows it's important to know where the decimals are because that's who's finishing
Right.
first and who isn't. You got to know time, you got to know place value to know where you are.
Right.
If you're going to qualify for your heat, you got to know what your speed needs to be. And you have to do the calculations to make corrections, course corrections. So it became a real good and fun opportunity to show, why do you need to know this?
Right. Goes back to again to the idea of motivation, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, to have to want to know. Well,
Exactly.
I feel like I could talk to you for so long 'cause this is so interesting. I don't want to get too academic for people because I love that aspect of it too. But we'll stick
Ah,
and stuff. But um, and it also the thing I was just thinking about is that's kind of another whole areas as far as educational materials like worksheets and textbooks. We often talk about kids not seeing themselves in picture books, but you've also addressed the other aspect. How often do they see themselves in the material that they're working on at school? So I love
exactly.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fun to be able to do the expository portions that were, showed the kids. And, the fun thing about the second book, the Eddie book, is that I was able to make Lewis Hamilton, the F1 racing phenom,
Mhm.
central to the story. And also Daryl Bubba Wallace,
Right.
before a lot of the Black Lives Matter, activism that he has been so much a part of, integral.
Right.
So I was happy and felt really kind of, not of avant-garde, but I felt like I was onto something. The fact
Cutting
that I
edge.
had tapped
Right.
into these, yeah, I'd recognized these personalities and saw
Mhm.
that they really were doing important things that children of color needed to be aware of. And at least that's what I felt, because I don't think, and I know up until I think just last week, if not this week, Daryl Bubba Wallace was the highest finishing. I think he may have even won a NASCAR race, and it was the first time in history that that had happened. So,
Wow.
to be a part of history and to know that education was a part of it, that's a really powerful message, I feel.
That is. That's wonderful. And it's so if somebody's listening to this and they're thinking they're inspired by the what you've done and they want to write a book also, they're not sure how to go about it or they don't have that motivation, what advice would you give to them?
I think, and for me, what was the most fun, first off, I would say make sure you're having fun through the process, because that's really the most important part. But to think of the family stories that fortify your life. I've spoken of the first and second book, but I haven't mentioned too much about the third, and that is Lorena and the Magic Mocha Mirror. That book, that story, the narrative there is that of a young girl who is basically body shamed.
Mhm.
She is among her peers who are smaller in size and stature than she, and she is really, she's given a hard time. And these are real stories that I had to really counsel my daughter about. Understand that you're beautiful. Everyone is beautiful. Everyone has a unique body. Everyone has a unique personality. Everyone is unique and special in their own way. And this was a family story that I had just so much fun turning into a book,
Mhm.
creating a beginning, a middle, and an end, all of which were part and parcel of the stories I've shared with my kids. I've shared with children outside of my family, as part of being, an adult, someone who cares about kids and their well-being. So, what would I share with them? Don't feel like you have to create a Shakespearean, sonnet, or your story has to be at an elevated level. If you're telling real stories, if you're telling stories that resonate with the people in your life, they'll resonate with others as well. And I think that's really the most important part of this whole odyssey for me has been, getting real, tangible stories out into the world that kids can kind of hold on to and make their own.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. And so are you working on another book now or what are you working on? What's next?
Yeah, I've had four stories in the back of my head for the past 4 years of school.
Mhm.
So it's interesting because now that I finished school, I'm having these really like unimagined opportunities popping up. But as I've taken time to be a part of this today, the books is where it started for me. And
Mm.
so I will never be too far afield from that. I do have some books in mind and in the works. I've been doing a lot of work in health literacy, and I'm trying now to kind of come up with the story or to pinpoint the story that I want to tell in that space, the health literacy space, to kind of
Interesting.
continue and move forward. Because I think that's a really important, again, an important area for children of color in particular, in this COVID era, that
Right.
many of the family members were the first responders. Many of the families have been
Right.
impacted perhaps in ways and to degrees that other families have not. So, aside from understanding what COVID is, just really understanding health literacy and how you can live your best life, how you can be mindful of health in real tangible ways, like all of the content I talk about,
Mhm.
and in ways that will touch kids' lives in a really direct way.
Oh, I love that. And I mean, what an important topic, especially for kids to be thinking about at an early age.
Yeah, yeah, it's important because, so many of our values are established early on and just the way
Mhm.
we see things. And again,
Right.
that perspective taking, how do
Mhm.
you see yourself in the mirror? The body image message of Lorena and the Magic Mocha Mirror is a
Mhm.
really important one, and it has implications for health as well and
Right.
discussions about health. So it's all really kind of part and parcel of the same endeavor to really have a real and lasting impact on literacy in all its myriad ways and all of its myriad facets.
Well, this has been so wonderful to talk to you. I'm excited to see the next book or the next project that you're working on. And I think this is wonderful that you have put this out here there for children of color, especially for all children to learn that empathy. And they're really wonderful books and fascinating research.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for joining us. And I'm going
Yeah,
to end it because I know we've taken a lot of your time, but I really do appreciate it.
I've enjoyed every moment of it. And thank you for your tenacity. I'm glad to be a part of your program.
Thank you.